Hey guys, in this video I will talk about HTML form element and I will create a registration form by only using HTML. At the end of this video, you will be able to create any other types of HTML forms along with this on your own. So let's get started. Forms are helpful when there is a requirement to take a set of input from the user. Like if you want to register your user on your website, you can create a form consisting of many input fields such as username, email ID, password, etc. And your user will fill it up during the registration process. So you are taking more than one input from your user at a single time. So the number of times the user needs to communicate with your application server reduces drastically and the speed of your application increases. Now let's start creating a basic form and add features to it one by one. Open up your favorite text editor. To create an HTML form element, you need to use the HTML form tag, which is a pair tag. So you need to put one opening tag and one closing tag, and all the child elements of this form element will remain between this opening and closing tags. There is likely no limit on how many inputs you can take using one HTML form, but remember you need to store the user inputs on your application server. So having extra inputs implies it will take more space on your server and hence will cause more expenditure. So it's always a good idea to take only the necessary inputs. Like in case of registration forms, we can take the username, email address and password as inputs. Now, to take input from the user, you need an HTML input element, which is a no content element, hence it has only one tag and it cannot have any child elements. Now you can save this file and open it in a browser. This is the input element and users will fill in this box, but to let them understand that they need to fill in their username here, let's add some label before this input element. A label is an HTML element that is used to represent a caption. All you need to do is to put an ID on the input element and refer it from the label element using the for attribute. If you don't know about the ID attribute, then remember it's a global attribute, means any HTML element can have this attribute and you must not use the same ID for two different elements. Now similarly add two more inputs for the email address and password respectively. This is a line break element, and if I do not use this, these two inputs will appear on the same line, which I don't want. After this, you need to add one submit button to submit the form after filling it. You can do it in two ways. Either you can put one button element with the type attribute set to submit, or you can use one input element with the type attribute set to submit. Both of this will submit the form when you click on it. Now let's fill in this form and submit it. It will not work because we have not yet put two very important attributes of the form element, the action attribute and the method attribute. The action attribute must have the URL or path where you want to send all the user inputs, and the method attribute must be set to post as we want to send data to the server. Before doing anything else, Let's add some names to the input fields. This is super important for both backend and front-end development. In a separate video, I will show you why it's exactly useful for both front-end and backend development. Now, if you do not have any server configured to receive this user inputs, you can use my Firebase public database. To use that, copy this JavaScript from the description and paste it just before the closing body tag. It will convert all the user inputs into JSON and will push it to the database. Now, as I am using JavaScript to submit this form, I can leave this action attribute value as empty. But when you will use a backend like Ruby on Rails, you will need this action attribute to contain the submission path. Now save the changes, refresh the browser, fill in this form again and click on the submit button. As you can see here, the user inputs are saved in our database, and this is the JSON data we get when we query the saved data from the database. So as our form is working fine, in the next video we will configure it to look better and we will add much more functionality.